Okay, so I kind of dig the gag that being Amish is still a thing in this version of the future, but like, I couldn't help but thinking, wouldn't it be funny if there was like a new version of that by then, where instead of still living like it was the 1700s, they moved up but cut off at like 1983, you know, so like they can still listen to music but only on cassettes, and their TVs are still analog, and the internet is the tool of Satan or whatever. Yeah, that would be funny, right? Yeah. Huh. Was that offensive? I can't tell. I mean, I guess I probably have to ask, like, an Amish person, but, you know, they're literally forbidden from watching this, so, yeah. Look, guys, sometimes there's just not a good joke for the cold open. We should probably just roll this. Duncan Jones made one of the best sci-fi movies of the early 2000s with Moon, a film that featured imaginative production design, a genuinely great lead performance by Sam Rockwell, and what presciently turned out to be the best possible version of a Kevin Spacey performance in the long term, the kind where he's not actually on screen for any of it. It was the sort of movie that gets a young filmmaker hailed as an exciting new voice with tons of promise, which he appeared set to fulfill by following it up with the extremely well-received sophomore effort The Source Code. And then he signed on to make the Warcraft movie. Yeah, that was unfortunate, wasn't it? Anyway, now he's back with Mute, a futuristic sci-fi thriller in the vein of Blade Runner that serves as a spiritual successor to Moon, which he's apparently been trying to get off the ground for almost 12 years. And as is so often the case with long-gestating passion projects, it probably would have been better off if he'd released it 12 years ago. That doesn't mean it's bad, it just feels like something that would have probably come off much more fresh and of the moment when it was originally conceived, or at least before someone had made an actual sequel to Blade Runner. That's not to say it would have been revolutionary a decade ago, but it would probably feel significantly less like an extended installment of Black Mirror, and unfortunate motifs like the use of gender ambiguity and pansexuality as weird indicators that it's the future would probably feel less jarringly out of place. What results instead is a flawed but interesting minor work that reaffirms Jones' skill at directing and world-building, but also suggests he's got some work to do yet on the solidity of narrative. The title refers to the fact that the film's hero, Leo, played by Alexander Skarsgård, is unable to speak owing to a childhood accident. Set in the slightly dystopian future in Berlin, Germany, the film is essentially a cyber-noir detective thriller in which Leo attempts to solve the mystery of what happened to his girlfriend Nadira after she suddenly vanishes without explanation. Just one problem, though. In addition to being mute, Leo was raised Amish and is thus alternately unable or unfamiliar with the inescapable panopticon of technology all around him that could both help or hinder his search. Meanwhile, what at first seems like a B story follows the workaday lives of two shady mercenaries played by Paul Rudd and Justin Theroux. If the film has a problem, it is structural. Once the build starts for the third act, it becomes apparent that what we've been watching has been designed as a two-track narrative with Skarsgård's story and Rudd and Theroux's on an inevitable collision course with each other. Things start to come into place, but it takes way too long for that to come into focus on its own. The performances are all pretty excellent, with Rudd probably being the standout just because he's playing so massively against type as a grimy, sleazy, ruthless asshole, but the eventual realization that we're supposed to be anticipating the moment that these characters wind up in direct conflict takes forever to crystallize, and for too long it just feels like we're watching a very compelling detective story being inexplicably interrupted at regular intervals by a series of disconnected cyberpunk character vignettes. Now, that's not to say that the vignettes are bad. Again, the performances are good and it's all pretty interesting in its own right. There's just a tonal disconnect where you spend a little too much time thinking, why am I seeing this, without a real answer or even a red herring answer, and it becomes especially noticeable when Theroux's character takes a really unpleasant turn, the narrative value of which takes way too long to come into focus. It's still visually interesting, the main detective story is extremely compelling, and the gimmick of Skarsgård's technology-adverse background is an inspired way to make his bewilderment at the future world around him line up with that of the audience. That's inspired, and it allows the film to not lean too hard on the idea of his impairment as a disability. Jones may still be better at world-building, mood, and character interplay than he is at storytelling, storytelling, but those first 3 count for a whole lot. 2.5 stars, very imperfect, but also pretty interesting.